Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being here today. We have Kevin Mikolajczak of Bellevue Lighting. I'm only going to do that one time to try to prevent embarrassing myself. Thank you so much for reaching out and wanting to come on today with Bellevue Lighting. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So like you said, my name's Kevin. I'm a professional lighting designer, technical director. I've had about 15 years of experience doing lighting for concerts, special events, theatrical events, and weddings. And Bellevue Lighting really brings that special piece that not necessarily everyone can bring. Because of our extended experience as well as the resources that we have, we can really make any moment feel really special in the way that we work with lighting and special effects to sort of bring your whole event together.
Yeah, and even just looking at your guys' site, it's very like striking, right? It's a very definitely like a distinctive because lighting is so important, especially as someone that works in video and just focusing on elevating things, setting the mood. What are some things that you guys pride yourselves on? Is it high quality? Is it like setting that mood? What are some things that you guys try to make sure that you come across with the events that you do?
Yeah, we definitely come across to kind of bring quite literally a little bit of color, but also theoretically a little bit of color. In the spaces that we work in, we really try to highlight some of the attributes that are in those spaces. So if that's columns, if that's different textures, and we'll bring textures, we'll kind of make the room feel like it's transformed into this sort of whimsical space that really fits whatever theme you're going for.
And it seems to me like, lighting is one of those things, whether it's events or weddings, not take it for granted, but it's almost like it's not appreciated unless it's not there, right? Like if you definitely like when you walk into a space and it's transformed, you realize it, but you don't necessarily maybe know why. I mean, is that something that you guys obviously, I mean, people are seeking you guys out, wanting your expertise, but are you educating that as well and trying to convey that?
Yeah, what we do a lot of times is people ask, what are your packages? And my answer is usually we don't have packages that way. It's really custom to the space and what we're working with. We always ask for pictures and measurements and that type of thing. So like you said, make it feel like make it look different. But you're right. A lot of times people don't notice those things. But in the back of your mind, you do notice the overall feeling of the room, and it completely changes the event.
And lighting is one of those things, right, where you can, go small, so small, and then get so kind of just over the top with everything.
Yeah.
I mean, do you guys hit both sides of that? Where do you guys kind of fall in line?
Yeah, we really do both. I mean, because of our experience in large concerts and that background, we can do anything from like a small space to an entirely large space with custom fixtures and that type of thing. Our largest record goes to show that we built a 40-foot chandelier for an event once because they wanted something huge. So we really go at full scale that way as well.
So you guys are Bellevue Lighting. Are you located on the east side? Is that where you guys live too? I mean, I grew up in Bellevue, so I'm always kind of I have a soft spot in my heart, right, for the other side of Lake Washington. Where are you from, and how'd you get involved in all this?
Yeah, so I'm actually from the Midwest. I'm from Wisconsin. My partner and I are both from the Midwest, and we moved out here together. We both are lighting people. We both moved into Bellevue to start. We currently now live in Seattle, even the name. But yeah, we do a lot of events over in Bellevue, so it still pretty much fits with what we do.
And in terms of lighting, is that something that you grew up passionate about, events and things? I mean, it's not just your typical job, right? Or your typical career path. So how did you get involved in working in all the events and everything? Did you grow up with like a theater background, or how did that go?
Yeah, I personally grew up with a theater background. At one point I did a camp that was just as a kid, hey, let's learn about theater. And I was really immersed in lighting. So then I started working in different theaters in the area, eventually working my way up to being at a technical director level, and then getting contracted to do concerts and events and weddings included in that, just to bring that special piece that's specific to the lighting trade.
It's a big step going from, working in theater then to saying like, hey, we're going to establish a company, right? This is what we're going to kind of, get our own clients, focus on that.
Yeah.
What drew that and that inspiration to do that?
Honestly, it was, we have so much equipment that's a variety of things. And we looked at it and said, people are always borrowing stuff from us. There's a lot of planners and things that borrow from us. Why don't we just start bringing ourselves as a name to these places? So we have endless amounts of things that we can bring, whether that's different pieces of, we can make it snow at your wedding, or we can make fire at your wedding, or we can do confetti, or all these crazy things that normally a lighting company that focuses just in weddings wouldn't have. But because we worked in theater and concerts for so long, we just have the stuff to pull off some amazing elements.
Was it a learning curve kind of entering into the wedding industry? I mean, obviously events are events, but they're, a different kind of, I mean, maybe it's almost, you can kind of do anything when you're doing events and dreaming things up, but, you might actually have to kind of wind it down a little bit for the weddings or kind of figure out how to fit in there. How was that? I've always said on the podcast, I knew, absolutely nothing about weddings entering the industry. So, I mean, what was it like kind of going from large scale and pairing to that?
Yeah, honestly, it wasn't that big of a difference. I think lighting is so specialized in that there's sort of a style that you run with. And my style is very much already very colorful and whimsical and lots of textures and patterns. So going from that and applying, saying, okay, we're applying this for a concert or we're applying this for a theatrical performance. But really what you're doing is you're transforming that space. So it's really no different than transforming a wedding space. I think what comes out in a wedding is more attention to detail and more specificity around, do we want to animate this area? Do we want to highlight this? Do we want to show that? And really fitting to a theme. It's a little more defined by what the planner and what design you're going for. But overall, it's a pretty easy transition going back in between those two.
So how did you grow up in the Midwest and get, I mean, just interested in all this stuff? I mean, it just doesn't seem like, it seems like, I'm interested to hear that story. So how did you, and then work our way into how we found our way to Seattle, but how did you, growing up in the Midwest, how did you, get involved in all this?
Yeah, so I grew up in Milwaukee specifically. So I sort of had a big city at my advantage where, once I started doing lighting, there's a small network of people that do it in that area. So it was really easy for me to jump into different projects and learn different things. And then from there, based on places I've lived, so I lived in Dallas for a while. And while I was in Dallas, same thing, there's a small network of lighting people. Once you know them, it turns into a, hey, I need help with this, or hey, I don't know how this works. Can you show me? Or can we figure it out together? So kind of learning as a group and being able to network with certain people really brought me up to the knowledge level I'm at now, which has been really successful for me.
And then what inspired you guys to come out to Seattle?
Honestly, we just like the area. We visited here on vacation once and just really like the scenery, the easy access to hiking and kayaking and all that, those activities. So we really just liked it. The weather's a lot better because there's no snow, which is nice. But yeah, we just really liked it. So we decided to move out here.
And Alana, since on your side, are you your partner? Are you guys together romantically?
Yeah. We've been dating for 4 or 5 years now.
And you guys said that you met on your website. It says you guys met, working together. Talk me through kind of that whole thing.
Yeah, we did. We were working an event together at a college, and it was like 3 a.m, and we were one of the only two people there. So I just kept talking to her, and then we ended up hanging out a bunch. And we really have been doing a lot of events together. We still travel back to the Midwest to do events, and a lot of stuff we do together. So we both really work really well together to make things happen.
What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've kind of learned over the years? Kind of, I mean, I'm sure seeing a lot of different things, experiencing, having a lot of different requests, having to do different builds and stuff. What are some things you've learned along the way that you wish you knew maybe back when you were getting started?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing, especially in lighting or any specific design space, is people don't really think of it as a service. So you think of, yeah, I need a photographer, I need a videographer, I need a DJ. But then you don't really think about those other pieces like, oh, I could rent furniture, or I could have a lighting person come in and transform the space, once you see it, it really makes that impact. But it's getting to that point of here's what we can do, that becomes a challenge, and that selling ourselves that way.
Yeah, that was kind of going to be one of my next questions is, there's, DJs, and I've worked with DJs, and there's other DJs that, they'll kind of set up their sound stuff, and then they'll have like a couple little of those LED lights and just kind of throw them in the corner. Right. And they're like, hey,
Yeah.
uplighting, and
Yeah.
so, and not that obviously you guys are, in direct competition, right? I mean, it's a different level of whatever, but that's still right. That's what some people perceive as like, oh, that's lighting, right? And then, the same with I deal with it. I've dealt with it for years, right? Videography isn't always like oh, we have photo, or even now with like live streaming. Well, my aunt's gonna have Zoom on her laptop or whatever. So how do you go about educating and working through that? And I'm sure it's a ton of, even with planners and things, educating, like, this is what we can do. This is why we're better. This is what, is the value that we bring. How do you constantly work through that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What I try to do is sort of discover both what your venue is, but also what your theme is. And then what's like the craziest thing you've ever wanted at your wedding? And those three questions usually bring out hey, here's that thing we can do. Here's kind of what it looks like, to give you an idea of like, oh, that is a specific lighting thing that I wouldn't have thought of. That's really where that comes together. And we do partner with different DJs and that type of thing. So if people do have special requests and the DJ is like, look, I've got like 8 uplights and I'll bring those. But if you want me to do this space and you want to do it right, then you should probably work with an actual lighting vendor. So it's really just selling that in the sense of what we can bring, and showing people that we can bring more to bring to their table. Yeah.
And I know that you've done these bigger things, trying to get more into weddings. Are you guys trying to be really work, one-on-one with your wedding clients like you would other people, and really like, okay, sit down, let's map this out, let's figure. I mean, I don't even know. I guess walk me through that, right? Let's say I want to hire you for my wedding, and I don't know anything about anything. Walk me through kind of what does that process of working with you guys look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it works is if you have a request come in, and I'll use one as an example. So I just got a request for putting string lights across the entire ceiling of my church for my wedding. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Let's look at that. Let's talk about it. And that's a very specific project. So that's great. If you don't have a specific project in mind, we can help you figure it out if we have a venue and a theme, like I've been saying. But then going off of that, what we end up doing is talking to you a little bit, kind of discovering a little bit about you, a little bit about what you're going for, so that we can apply those textures and colors and whatever else could be relevant, or pull out some intricate device that does some cool thing that is relevant for your specific wedding. So we'll do that. And like you said, we do end up mapping out the space to figure out what our game plan is, depending on the size of the space. And if we've never been there, we'll want to go and tour, take some measurements, really make sure that we're well equipped with what we need to make that space really transformative.
What is your in terms of like wedding stuff? What does the typical client look like? Because it's not, like I said before, with video, it's certain people want it, certain people don't. What kinds of people are the people that want custom lighting at the scale you guys are going to do for their weddings?
Yeah, most of the people that come to us really just want something a little extra. They see our pictures and they're like, oh, that's really cool. I really like pink, and my whole wedding's going to be pink. So let's add some color in there. It's really people looking for a little extra, or it's people looking for, oh, I know I want lights in my wedding because I saw it at somebody else's. That's what happens a lot too. It's like, yeah, I saw it and it looked really cool. So let me find somebody to do that. Then they'll come to us. And a lot of times too, they'll come and say, oh, do you do music as well? We're like, yeah, we can play music, or we can also contract a DJ for you to come in and do it professionally. So we do kind of help that way as well, because it is confusing between what's a DJ and what's a specific lighting person.
And this might be more for the events and things, but when it comes to working with like photo and video people, are you talk me through just that kind of collaboration? Because it's so interesting to me, because most of the time, we're shooting events and stuff, and it's just kind of like, it is what it is, right? Like, we don't get a lot of say in that, right? Talk me through kind of how you can help be collaborative in that process, and really kind of trying to develop like, well, what could we do, or what things are possible, right? As opposed to just like, well, this is the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically with video, one of our video customers is actually Microsoft. So if they have a video, we'll work with their video team and set up the space, understand what shots they're going for, understand the layout of the room and where we need to hit certain spots. And that's honestly the same approach we take with weddings too. It's really trying to figure out all the different collaborators, whether that's your linens person, your tables person, even catering in terms of what space they're using and how they're using it, because you really want to accentuate the whole room. So working together, we can usually figure out a good game plan around that. Because in order for lighting to work, it needs to match everything else in the room. So understanding all of those, plus how it looks on camera, because if you're taking a picture and you have this big blue light behind you, it's not going to be very exciting. But if we can line up that picture just right, your photographer will get that $1 million picture that you paid them for, right?
I'll never forget one of I have other guys that like subcontract video stuff for me. And one of the first weddings I ever had years ago were with my subcontractor. And he went out and the DJ had those just the really cheap like LED, like the really, really cheap, like the flicker ones, how like everything now is like you get these flicker free, I think they call them like LED lights, and it's, a consistent whatever. And he sends me like a cell phone clip of the video, and it's like the whole room is just like vibrating. Like, there's like absolutely nothing that you can do. And you're like, no, like I wish that we would have like been able to talk to, and this was not like a lighting professional. This was just like a subpar DJ that then had super subpar lights, and but it ruined. I mean, it on the serious note, it ruined a lot of the footage because it just was literally unusable because of how.
Right.
And there's nothing more frustrating where you can bring in a talented professional and really like elevate things, or then someone that doesn't know what they're doing can really like ruin that kind of, just make it so hard for everybody else.
Yeah.
Talk me through just like I guess the philosophy of lighting. Like if you're looking at a space, like are there certain things, are you trying to like make things look larger than they are? Are you trying to work with certain colors? Are certain things better than others? I don't know any of this stuff, right? Like I just point a camera and go. So like talk me through just like when you enter a space, like what are you thinking? What's going through your head?
Yeah, a lot of what I'm thinking about is how we can accentuate different pieces and how we draw the difference between the foreground and the background. Those are the two big elements of that. So if we're in a long cathedral, we want it to feel huge. We want it to feel massive, because then you'll feel that feeling of, oh, I'm in this space. So that's what we try to do, is bring out some of those elements in the foreground and create some type of depth to the room. If you're in a small space, that's really important, because then with lighting specifically, you can make that tiny room. That's all you could afford, and that's okay. But if we bring lights in, all of a sudden it'll feel huge. Or if you're in a room, this has happened a couple of times where it's got some terrible drapery or it's got some horrible decoration, but it's the room you got, so that's what you get to work with. We can change a lot of that with lighting specifically. So those types of comments are really helpful for us to be able to scope some of that. And to answer your question, it's really about what are we bringing to the front and what are we tucking in the back, and how do we want that to look and live on top of each other, because it's all about layering the different pieces together.
Yeah, I was going to ask too. Yeah, where obviously you want to accentuate things, but then it's also not like hiding flaws, but just like pushing things. Like I watch a lot of wrestling, right? And that's like the trick. If you have a room that maybe it isn't filled the way you want it to be filled, or doesn't have, the look that you want it to have, it's almost like darkening the things that you don't want to accentuate, right? And then really like drawing the focus and eyes to what's important. You guys look at that too, and like, well, how are we really going to spotlight the stuff that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to highlight sort of the big items in the room. So like if you have a buffet table, we're not going to highlight that. But if you have your head table, obviously we're going to add something to that to make it stand out. So it's really about creating the space. And really the focus that we want people to pay attention to. And that's really a theatrical tactic of how do we draw focus to different areas, and having that experience, it's really easy for us to do that in a space as well.
What's it been like kind of coming to Seattle, getting into the Seattle industry, getting into the wedding industry? Just in terms of networking and vendors and just, like I said, I knew nothing about weddings getting into it. I worked in news for a long time and then transitioned into weddings like 6, 7 years ago. I mean, what's it been like kind of doing that, and what's that experience been like?
Yeah, it's been interesting. At least since the Seattle market, it seems there's little pockets of people that know each other. So we've been trying to sort of meet new people, talk to a lot of people. We're a part of a couple of professional organizations to help do some of that. And really, it's almost just by word of mouth. It's, oh, we saw your stuff at this event, or we heard your name from somebody. And, the bride and groom or the bride themselves reaches out and they're saying, we're looking for this. So that's really how it comes about. And it's been interesting trying to network with people just that, oh, you know this person too? Or like, oh, you're a new group of people. Let's try to meet you. So it's really been interesting meeting a whole bunch of people, but it's also been a lot of fun trying to navigate that world as well.
Because it's interesting because with kind of professional lighting, it's a little like what I'm in, where there's not like 50,000 people, right, of doing what you do, right? So it's really nice because I do feel like you can fill a niche and have your own kind of thing. And then there's not even that many. And I've been in the Seattle wedding industry for, like I said, like 7 years, and there's just not that many, right? Like large scale lighting companies. So it's interesting, to have you guys come in and have kind of a different perspective, and then being able to, meet with different planners and network and different venues and figure out, show people what you can do, right? Because it's something where, like, once that people do that sort of thing, and then every time you have a client, it's like, yep, okay, like we got to go with them, because it's such just a specialized labor intensive thing that you just want, you really need to have the people that know what they're doing, right?
Right. Yeah. And there's really not that many. We're friends with all of them. There's only
Yeah.
like a handful of companies. So we all know each other. We get along fine. We borrow stuff, we trade stuff. But really, it's the people that you're really hiring at the end of the day.
Yeah, I did want to talk about inventory a little bit, and how is that managed with you guys, and just where there has to be so much stuff. Are we renting things? Do we have a secret bunker somewhere that we? I mean, but how does that? I have no idea how that even works.
Yeah. I have a secret bunker in our basement with a bunch of shelves and lots of equipment. But then I also have access to a bunch of different theatrical equipment from various places that I have stored at those venues. And then if there's something that we absolutely need, we have people that we can rent it from or borrow it from. All of the really cool stuff I keep at home. So we have all that ready to go. So like I said, we have snow machines, we have fog machines, we have low lying fog machines, we have hazers, we have pretty much any effect you could think of, we can bring to the table. Um, and then anything specific, if you're doing a huge venue and we just don't have enough gear for it, and you have a 3,000 person wedding, we'll rent a couple of things to add in that space from people we know.
Talk me through, and this might be obvious to you, but like, like the fog machine and the smoke and all these things. Like, what are some practical uses that you guys have used that sort of stuff for, right? Because I think people hear that stuff and like, well, that sounds neat, but like, I would never use that, or when would that ever be a thing? So, talk me through some like practical uses that you guys have had for stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the easiest ones, and a lot of people are now offering this, is the dancing on a cloud. So we can do the whole cloud thing. So you're on a cloud. And not only that for that moment, but the gear we have is so professional that we can actually do it at the ceremony as well. So if you think about it, if you're doing a whimsical theme of fantasy, whatever, we can have, some fog rolling as you walk down the aisle, those types of pieces. And then in the spaces themselves, we have devices that can help bring out some of the light elements that we bring. So we can introduce beams and we can introduce patterns, and those can all kind of fly through the air in a really interesting way that helps us shape the space even more. because we can really bring in focus if we can shoot beams through the air, and we have the haze equipment to do some of that. Another interesting piece that I've mentioned is the snow piece, and that's quite literally, we can make it snow. It's not cold and it doesn't stick. It comes down and evaporates, so it really makes it feel like it's actually snowing, which is pretty cool. And then on top of that, we also have sort of another tier of fog, which is we call it our geysers. So those can shoot fog and be different colors, and those we can do for like fire or exciting moments or disappearing acts, entrances, anything like that. We can really bring out different pieces. You can think of it almost like a concert at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is kind of like your imagination. You know, the client's imagination is really the only thing that's holding it back, right? At that point,
right? Yeah, and we offer whatever we have, and then if it's something you want to try out, we'll bring it.
Talk me through maybe some of the things that you're most proud of in terms of being asked to do something that was kind of outside the box or larger scale, you know, something that you guys really had to flex your minds and muscles and everything, you know, creative muscles to get done, just to kind of show what's capable in terms of what you guys do.
Yeah, I have two of them. I mentioned earlier our chandelier. Someone just wanted a giant chandelier at their event. So we said, okay, we'll come and fabricate one. So we fabricated one, made it light up, and then also lit up the space. It was a huge arena event, and they absolutely loved it. And then some other events that we've done more wedding related is we've lit up old buildings that they're in front of, where we can light up the entire outside of the building, so the lights outside the building seem like they're dancing across. And we really can do that in any type of space. So bringing out different elements that way at a huge scale is definitely what we're kind of really proud of, especially.
And that those sort of things like building the chandeliers, it's so much more physical work too, right? That goes into it. And I think that people don't necessarily realize, right? I mean, if you guys, you know, putting together one of those large scale events, I mean, you know, tons of hours, right? You're going into like planning and scaling all that stuff. I mean, how does that process work? Just going from, you know, conceptualizing something to like actually, you know, like the chandelier, whatever. Walk me through like what did that process look like from start to finish?
Sure. Yeah. So when the request comes out and we agree, like, oh, this is what we're going to do, what we go back and do is we have to draw out the space, whether that's on paper or if it's big space, we'll actually 3D model it and start looking at how the lighting could play in that area. And then once we have an idea of kind of where we want to set fixtures and we've talked to other vendors and come up with a plan all together, we'll go ahead and map out how that would work. And then we have to program all of our lighting ahead of time just to make it easier for when we get there. So all of our instruments that we have all get programmed here before we load them up and bring them to the event. They're plugged in a very specific order. They all have a very specific place that we put them that we've already figured out. We may move a couple of them once we get there, but once we have that plan from the beginning, it's all just about programming and getting it ready so that when we get there, everything's ready to go and it looks exactly how we wanted it to.
Yeah, I just can't imagine because it's one of those. I mean, you got to show up and it's got to work, right? I mean, you got to show up and there's not a lot of like, well, let's, you know, like if I'm going to try to light an interview or something, it's like, okay, well, let me go tweak that. I mean, you guys can't when you have a build that big, you know, you really got to try to nail it as much as you can walking in the door, right?
Right, because we only have the amount of time that the venue's open for too. So if you have a wedding in the afternoon, we can only get there in the morning. That's all the time we have. So we do have to have a plan and be ready to go right when we land.
Have you guys had a chance? What venues have you guys had the opportunity to work at here, kind of in the Pacific Northwest so far?
Yeah, we honestly haven't worked at very many here. We just started opening up to venues ourselves within like the past year or two. So it's a fairly new thing. Most of our venues end up, we've done a lot of City of Bellevue buildings. I also work for them, so it's a really easy way for me to go and do that. We've done some different older buildings in Seattle, which has been cool. And then we've also done some exterior events, just at weddings that have tents or backyard events. Obviously, this year's been very slow for everyone. But given that, at least those are the types of events we've done thus far just for a specialty purpose.
Yeah, because that's the hard thing too, is because where you guys, it's not just weddings, it's all those events, right? It's the concerts, it's the performances. I mean, it's everything, right? I mean, what's it been like just over the last 6 months for you guys, kind of working through that?
Yeah, for us, it's actually been really interesting because people are still having those things and they're having them remotely. So for us, we've been doing a lot of sending out of gear, delivering gear at a distance to different locations. So I just had a bunch of gear out for a play that was all the people were logging in and streaming it, but all their gear had to be sent to their house, programmed, ready to go. And then obviously when it gets back here, we have to clean it and reset it. So it's been interesting. It's been a different way where we're not attached to this stuff, but we have to have it ready to go for when we do send it out.
What are your guys' goals, for the besides obviously, hopefully for us all to kind of get back to normal, right? But
Yeah.
what are some goals for growth and development that way as you guys move forward?
Yeah. Since we're fairly still new to the area, I'd say it's really for us to sort of build those partnerships with different planners and venues. We have a couple that are going pretty strong, but it'd be great to be able to understand from even at a venue or planner level what lighting actually brings to the table, and then have us ready as that resource that can supply some of that or any of the effects we offer too, because those aren't something that you normally think of. But when it comes up, you really want to have somebody who could do that if that's something you could sell, right?
What do you wish more people knew about you guys and what you guys do and the services you offer?
Yeah, I wish more people knew about how specialized it is, because it's really not the traditional, give me a package and I'll come bring some uplights in and some dance lights and we'll be set to go. It's really, really specialized to each of the spaces and events that we do. So it in that sense, it's not your typical, yeah, I'm just going to call and rent some lights and be done. We really try to be really specific about what we can do, and we try to, like I said, transform the space. So that's a completely different approach that you don't see very often.
What's kind of where do you find the joy? Excuse me. Where do you find the joy in what you guys do? Like what do you enjoy most about it, and where does your passion come from in terms of how you guys operate?
Yeah, I personally really like bringing lighting to an event that people walk into and they just say wow, because you just can't believe what you're seeing. You don't notice any of the lighting, obviously. You don't notice all the pieces in the room, but all of it coming together, just it marks your brain and you'll just remember that day for a very long time.
Talk about some of the client feedback you get, right? Because obviously this is something that you guys work a lot with. This isn't just that someone just says, "Hey, we want this." I mean, it's a ton of back and forth. Trying to figure it out. Them trying to get their vision. Talk about just how you feel, kind of getting that feedback from them at the end of the day, and hearing from guests and seeing that sort of thing on like a personal level, kind of accomplishing what they wanted to do.
Yeah, for me, it's great because when we hear that it looks incredible, we've done our job, right? Or if people have a great time and there's tons of beautiful imagery that comes out of the event, because really what you're trying to do is make something that you're going to remember. So if you can remember it, at least for me, I feel like I've done my job really well.
Uh, just like I know it's not like a one size fits all in terms of packages, but just in terms of putting together, quotes and stuff for people, is it just case by case and kind of the work that's required? How do you kind of go about if someone's trying to like, well, I want to hire these guys, or how do they wrap their heads around kind of how all this works?
Yeah, it's really case by case. And the easiest thing to do, honestly, is reach out. And what we'll do is we'll break down your event a little bit and then tell us your budget too, because what we try to do is we might not be able to bring a ton of stuff to your event, but we could bring enough where we can make it feel special. So I just did a pretty low budget event over in Bellevue, and it was just at a greenhouse. And we brought some lights, and it really changed the space. It didn't cost very much. It was just the bride and groom. So it really, we can do just about anything. It's just a matter of what the budget is. So once we have that, we can formulate a plan to work with anything pretty much.
Are there certain practicalities for like indoor weddings versus outdoor, or things that people need to consider when like the amount of lights, or the strength of the lights? I mean, I know that's not the right question, but like what are practicalities, right, between indoor and outdoor weddings?
Yeah, for indoor, it's interesting with where you put them too. Because if you think, like my example earlier with the string lights, you can't just put those on the ceiling. Like there's no way to attach them. So there's some technicalities there of how do we mount certain things indoors, but that also applies outdoors. You know, how do we elevate? How do we use? But then also, at least in Seattle, especially, what season is it? Because not all of our lights can be outside, obviously. So if it's going to rain or anything, that's something we need to consider. So it's so space specific that there's a lot to consider when we're installing different fixtures in different venues.
Yeah, and I think it's just, if you're on the fence about it, if you're thinking about it, I think it's so worthwhile to talk to someone, right, and try to figure it out. I know that Dorothy and I, when we got married, we had talked about, doing stuff, and then I just think people get lazy or they don't, but that's going to be what, I mean, I think it's so worthwhile to talk to people and try to figure it out. Because like you said, even if you have a smaller budget, you can, fine tune the things that you need, bring in certain things and not, I mean, so much of it, right, goes back to just like, reaching out, talking, seeing what's the right fit, right? I mean, what would you say if someone was kind of on the fence about, well, I don't know if I want to do it or not, or if we can afford it?
Yeah, I would say give us a shot anyway, because we will figure it out. And if it's one of those things where it's, I'm already overwhelmed with all of these things, there's a lot of moving pieces already. Why do I want to bring in another vendor? Just give us the names of the other vendors. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to work with us, and we'd be more than happy to work with them. But we can plan it without you having to be there. Or if you want to be super involved, that's an option as well. And if you're on the fence, honestly, if you even just Google pictures of great lighting at weddings, you'll just be amazed at the types of things that are possible. Or any type of, for that matter, celebrity wedding. If you Google any of that, you'll be like, oh, it's snowing and everything's purple. How did they do that? I mean, we can do that too. So any type of imagery that you find, especially for inspiration, obviously we can do it. So it'll be worthwhile, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the thing is, and other videographers are different. I mean, we don't do a lot of like our own outside lighting, right? Like, we really try to respect or whatever, just however it is, right? We're not going to bring in, I know there's some videographers that will come in and like light toast and bring in and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
We just don't do that. We just try to get in the way, and it takes time, and you're getting in the photographer's way. And also, if the couple has lights or not, are you disrupting that? What's going on? But having a first dance or shooting a reception room that is professionally lit is so much different and so much more dynamic than just shooting like a first look. That's not. I mean, it's just so flat. I mean, it really, you can see, and when we used to bring in, we used to bring in like a little spotlight, hand spotlight, and just being able to like have it and then not, and be able to see the difference. And it's so night and day, but people just don't get that that's how light works, right?
Right. Yeah. You don't necessarily think about it. But I mean, even if you walk in a room, or especially everyone should know by now that when you have a light on your face on a Zoom call, you look so much cleaner and brighter. Whereas if you don't, then all of a sudden people can't see you. It's not as clear. It's the same thing about the space, and we can make it feel like we can separate those differences to make certain pieces stand out, like you said, pretty easily. And thanks for not bringing giant photo boxes to weddings. I appreciate it.
Dude, and it's fine, but like I'll talk, I'll see these videographers, and I'm like, it's enough to have the tripods in the way, and we're always blocking someone, or Aunt Susie can't see, or what's going on. But then, when you have all, you're trying to light people, and then they're blinded, and they're trying to watch the thing, and other people, and the photographer's flash. I don't know. It's too much. We try to at least just be a little more naturalistic when it comes to that. But obviously, having the outside light that's built into the event is way different than like us coming in and shining the light in someone's face.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else you want to touch on before we let you go? I feel like this has been really informative and a lot of good ideas and things. Anything else you want to touch on?
I don't think so at this point. I mean, if anyone's interested in any of our services, obviously go to our website, check out some pictures, and if you're curious, just send us an email, and I'm sure we'll have some plan for you. And if we don't, we can point you in the right direction too.
The good thing about what you guys do is it does translate very well to photo and video, right? Where like sometimes, if you're like an MC or something, and it's really hard to like to sell that visually online. But for like you guys, you go to the site and you're just like, oh, okay, like I 100% understand what they're about, right? Like I understand this, I get the difference. So at least you guys have that going for you in terms of some of the some of the wedding pros that we talk about on the podcast. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really nice too with lighting specifically because if you take that picture or video, it's mostly always going to turn out good just because of how it's set up.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to learn more about your guys' services and different, seeing all the different photos and everything, where would you have them check out?
Yeah, if you go to Bellevue.lighting, just type that in, hit enter on your browser, and it'll pop up. And you can look at some pictures, and there's an email form there, and you can just get in contact with me.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. If you're like Kevin, I'm so glad you reached out. If you're like Kevin and you're interested in coming on, you can go to bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest. And that's a nice, easy questionnaire that we have that kind of gets you in the system. And this has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.